Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. But with that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, look, we all know it's realignment. But what I would say is it's been very fascinating to kind of see the cycle of all this, not only in real life, but also on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Last Thursday, we have the bombshell USC-UCLA. It's crazy. It shocks the world. We talk about it on this show. Then over the weekend, that dust settles, and you start to think about what's next. You hear the reports that Oregon, Washington, they're not going to the Big Ten. And so what we talked about on Tuesday's show was what I believe was the topic of that moment, which was, okay, what are the next big topics? What are the next big moves in realignment? And those are pretty straightforward. Does Notre Dame decide to join a conference, specifically likely the Big Ten? And are any of these ACC schools going to be able to get out of this contract and leave for probably the SEC, but either one of those two conferences? Well, now we have another trickle-down effect, and that is what happens to everybody else, specifically the Big 12 and Pac-12 schools. This week has been full of rumor. It's been full of innuendo, and I'm going to get to all of it in a second. But before I do, what I would just say is this. This is such a fascinating topic with so many layers because of the timing of everything that has happened. And so over the next couple minutes, I know you guys are going to want definitive answers from me. Who's going where? When are they going? Who's joining who? Who's staying behind? Who's going to get left behind? I don't think it's that simple, and it's because of who left UCLA and USC, when they left, and the situation they left those other 10 schools in. So let's get into it because college realignment rumor season is here, and boy, oh boy, is it a crazy time. Now, over the course of probably the last week or so, we did have two definitive things come out from the Pac-12. One, on Friday, right after the USC-UCLA news, the 10 remaining school presidents gave approval to the Pac-12 to seek realignment candidates, teams to join the Pac-12. We also got this goofy report, which I think is kind of funny, and I'll explain why in a minute. I think it was Monday or Tuesday, that the Pac-12 is open for business with TV partners. And that's goofy, and I'll explain why momentarily. But here are some of the rumors that we have heard over the last couple days. We have heard, one, that the Big 12 is in deep discussions with 4 teams currently in the Pac-12. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, Arizona State. Then we heard that the Big 12 has reached out to 6 schools in the Pac-12. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, Arizona State, Oregon, and Washington. Then we heard that the ACC and Pac-12 are going to merge together in some sort. They're not really merging, but they're going to put together a loose alliance. By the way, loose alliance didn't work out too well last year with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 when the Big Ten raided the Pac-12 for its 2 best teams. But there is going to be a potential alliance between the Pac-12 and the ACC. The winner of each conference plays a championship game in Vegas. Can't lie, I love Vegas. That sounds terrible. Congrats to Florida State. Good luck getting Florida State fans out to Vegas for a JV championship game to hopefully get into the playoff. That is not going to happen. And then finally, by the way, we got a report on Thursday from something called Swim Swam News, which, by the way, shout out to Swim Swam News. I know none of you care, but my blue check mark got taken away on Twitter a few days ago, and they didn't explain why. Swim Swam freaking News has a blue check mark. But anyway, they put out a report that North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, and Clemson are leaving for the SEC. All of it is rumor. As I record, none of it is fact. By the way, I could believe some variation of all of those reports. But what I would say is, again, you guys are asking me what's going to happen. And I think it's really complicated for a couple reasons. First of all, what I would just say more than anything is this. Don't believe every report. Because not as many people have access to real information as you think. What do I mean by that? I might have talked about this on Tuesday's show. If I did, forgive me for repeating myself. But I talked to some people from USC over the weekend. And the number of people that knew about the Big Ten move, a move that is going to fundamentally alter USC athletics forever. You could probably count on one hand the number of people that were privy to those conversations. as I told you on Tuesday's show, and I do think I talked about this a little bit, my understanding is that most of USC staff, like 90% of USC staff, found out about the move to the Big Ten the way you and I did via social media. Those who were in the know had to sign a non-disclosure. Nobody knew except for the highest levels of the athletic department. So why I don't believe 80% of these rumors is because the number of people that have access to real information is completely limited because nobody wants to have the real information get out because of contracts and negotiations and leverage and this and that. I don't think there's 30 people at Utah that know what's going on behind the scenes with a potential move to the Big 12. Same with Arizona, same with Oregon, same with Cal, same with Stanford. Think about the ACC's perspective. They have 15 teams, whatever it is, that are probably trying to get out of that league right now. You think they want that out in the public? So I don't believe most of what comes out. But two, why this story is so interesting, why this story is so fascinating is because of the reason that it happened in this moment right now. And remember, why it happened right now is pretty straightforward. It is because the Pac-12 TV contract is up in 2024. Nothing had been signed. Nothing is binding any of these teams to the league beyond 2024. And so what we have now, USC and UCLA are gone, and we kind of have a chicken and egg situation, a game of chicken, if you will, between everybody in the league, between the schools, between the conference, between the schools and the conference, between the schools and the TV contract. Essentially, let me start with the TV contract, okay? So the Pac-12 puts out this sweet, lovely press release that says, we are open for negotiation for TV. Well, that'd be like if my wife left me today, me walking down to the bar and saying, hey, ladies, I'm open for a long-term relationship. It's great that I announce it. Doesn't mean that anybody's interested, and that's what's going on with the TV networks right now. The Pac-12 put that out there to try and get some traction on a TV contract, but the TV networks are all like, well, who exactly are we committed to? Because right now, we don't really know who's in this conference, which takes me to the second part of this. And by the way, the Pac-12 is like, well, just commit to us, and then we can lock teams in. But the second part of this is that not only is the conference and the TV networks in the middle of a game of chicken, but so are the individual schools. And here's why. It's because of what we talked about on Tuesday and really what we talked about on last Thursday. It's because everybody is hoping to wait for that golden ticket to the Big Ten or the SEC, most likely the Big Ten. And so how do you get people to commit to anything long-term in whatever we're calling this? If we want to call it the Pac-12, if we want to call it something else, whatever. How do you get anybody to commit long-term when everybody is trying to get out? So that is why this is so fascinating. And I do not envy George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner, because this is almost an impossible situation, right? Let's just start with Oregon. I think we all agree, at least in football, Oregon's the biggest brand remaining. And I think Oregon, if they had their druthers between going to the Big 12 or trying to hold the Pac-12 together, I think they'd actually prefer to hold the Pac-12 together rather than leave for the Big 12. Now, maybe it kind of helps their state school, Oregon State, whatever, but I think that is what Oregon would prefer. But what they would really prefer is what we know they would prefer, which is to wait around and see if the Big Ten eventually expands. Because remember, we've talked about this. The Big Ten, we are one move away from another crazy round of realignment, and that move is pretty straightforward. That move is Notre Dame deciding, you know what? It is time for us to get into a conference. It is time for us to say goodbye to this independent life and settle down and get committed. To use the relationship term, they've been single forever. They've been independent forever. It's time to settle down with the Big Ten and get that $70 million check. If that happens, then at least one other Pac-12 team is coming with them. Now, I believe it would be Stanford. I've been told on good authority Stanford would be that team. But at the same time, if you're Stanford, if you're Oregon, if you're Washington, yeah, you're kind of sort of committed to this Pac, whatever it's going to be. But you're not really committed because you're hoping that Notre Dame decides to join the Big Ten and then there's at least one more spot open. And so if you're the Pac-12, how do you get Oregon committed? And then at the same time, if you're those other schools, if you're the Arizona schools, if you're the mountain schools, how do you commit to Oregon knowing that they have one foot out the door? And so that's where it gets interesting. I think Arizona, from what I can gauge, is kind of leading those other 4 schools in the Southwest Rocky Mountain area. Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah. And I think if Arizona absolutely had its druthers, I think if they knew Oregon was 1,000% committed, then they would stay committed. We'd keep the Pac-10 and we'd add 2 teams. But I don't think Arizona believes that Oregon is committed, and so now I think Arizona probably is leaning towards trying to figure out a way to get to the Big 12. I'm not saying it's 1,000%, and I'm not saying even Arizona knows at this point, because Arizona, again, is trying to figure out what Oregon is going to do. And so that's why this whole thing is interesting. I've had you guys ask me all week, well, what's going to happen? Well, I don't know, because I don't believe that Oregon's going to commit long-term to the Pac-12, and if Oregon doesn't commit, then that means that the Arizona Southwest schools aren't going to commit to Oregon. And then you have this whole crazy dynamic. And so I have no idea what's going to happen, because I don't even think most of these schools are going to happen. Now, I think if Oregon gives some sort of blanket commitment, and I don't know what that is, then I think the Pac-10 as they are stay together, and they probably add 2 schools. If I had to guess the 2 schools, I would say San Diego State, keep a Pacific Southern California footprint, and UNLV. Vegas is a booming market. I don't think they care that much about UNLV athletics, although maybe if UNLV basketball got good again, they would. That's what I think will happen if Oregon gives any type of long-term commitment, but for the 1,000th time, I just don't know if they're going to. And if they don't, what does Arizona do? Does that make it more likely to go to the Big 12? And by the way, does the Big 12 just convince Oregon and Washington, hey, look, you guys are out on an island up there. You go do what you got to do, but these 4 schools are coming with us, and then if those 4 schools come with them, then I think it's pretty likely that the Pac-12 as we know it ceases to exist. I don't know what happens with the Bay Area schools. I think Oregon State and Washington State go to the Mountain West. It is just absolutely crazy, but that is in fact where we are in conference realignment. Nobody wants to commit to anybody. Nobody trusts anybody else. And it is just a fascinating game of chicken. Can the Pac-12 get a TV network to commit? Can the network get teams to commit? Can Arizona really trust Oregon? Can Oregon really trust Arizona? On and on and on and on and on. I'm telling you, this is one of the most fascinating stories that I can ever remember.